everybody, welcome back to Moving Forward with Jennifer J. I am so glad you joined me again, and this is episode 104. So today we are going to talk about some things that we talked about. I think it's been about 5 or 6 episodes ago. I didn't go back and look exactly, but at any rate, we're going to look at fruits of the Spirit. So some people say fruit, and fruit can be plural even when there's no S, and some people say fruits of the Spirit, and I don't know which one is correct. I have heard it said that if you have all of the fruit, you don't just have one or the other, you have all of the fruit once you are saved, but you do have to cultivate it. So when we talked about it before, it was about that there's maybe more than one that you're harvesting, one or more than one that you're cultivating, and one or more than one that you're just now sowing and you really need to work on. So I think of like a seed. So you have it, but like a seed, you need to plant it and water it and try to help that to grow. So I knew which one mine was, and I have been working on it, but there might be, well, first of all, let's start with the fruit of the Spirit. So you might not know what those are, but it's in Galatians 5:22, I think. But I didn't look that up either, so I probably should. But it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. So those are the fruit of the Spirit. And you might be really good at patience, let's say. That's probably wasn't a good one to pick because most people aren't good at patience. But maybe you are. My daughter Sarah, great at patience. So patient. She has 3 little kids. So patient. So maybe you're really good at patience, and maybe that is one that you've harvested. Whatever one of all those that I just said, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, and self-control. Of those, there might be more than one, but think of the ones that you're really good at. You have that really down. Maybe it's kindness. Maybe you're just really good at showing kindness. Whichever one it is, think about those. Those are the ones that you should use every day, like clockwork, without thinking. It should be your knee-jerk response to use those gifts that you're good at. To look for opportunities. I like to call them God opportunities. So look for places where you can use those fruit. But then there might be some that you're working on. Maybe you're not as good at patience. Maybe you lose your temper too much or get frustrated too easily. And so maybe that's something that you're working on, that you really are struggling with, or you've really got to hoe that garden and get those weeds out. Maybe it's peace. Maybe you have a hard time being at peace. Maybe you worry a lot. Maybe you say your prayers, but then you take it right back and worry over it. We're all at different places, and we all have the fruit of the Spirit. In fact, in my notes, I've written down 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 11, where it says you have to search for it and eagerly pursue it. It is inside of you, but it is still an active verb, something that you have to do. You have to eagerly pursue it. So it can just lay dormant inside you, or you can say, no, I want to grow that thing, right? And that's what we need to do to become more mature Christians and to be able to flourish on the vine with Jesus Christ. So, we're a branch, but branches blossom, right? We leaf out and we blossom. And the only way we do that is if we are connected to the vine, first of all, Jesus, and then feeding our spirit. So we need to actively be trying to do these things. So whichever ones you're trying to cultivate, kind of think about what those are and maybe even write them down, because that'll help you. And you might have done that if you watched a few episodes back. You may have already written those down, and this is just kind of an update. I wanted to check in and see how you were doing with those. So then there might be some that you really haven't, excuse me, because something going on with this weather in Arizona today. But something might be going on with you where you haven't really grown very much in a certain area or two. I certainly have an area that I have written at the top of my list as one that I really need to focus on to get it growing. And you probably have one too, at least one. You might have more than one, that you really need to focus on getting that thing planted and getting it water and fertilize it and really baby that thing until it can take some root and start to grow. So think about what those are for you. Of all those 9 different fruit, which ones are you harvesting using every day? Which ones are you cultivating? They're taking root and they're growing, but you're working at them, hoeing that garden. And which ones are you really needing to plant and baby and nurture? And then think about that, because in Isaiah 12:2 it says, I will trust the Lord and not be afraid. But you have to remember that the devil will come for the fruit that you cultivate. So you have to be ready, because he doesn't want you to cultivate the fruit of the Spirit, right? He would like to keep you where you are. He'd like to keep you worrying about your concerns and things instead of giving them to God. He would like to keep you getting angry at your family or losing your temper with your kids, being whatever, not being the person or the Christ-like person that God wants you to be. The devil would like to see you tripping up over and over again. So he is wanting to come after your fruit. So you have to be ready to protect it and guard it and grow it. And as you grow it, it's going to become more powerful. And you're going to become more powerful, only through God, of course. But he's going to grow those fruit and help you to handle situations differently and to mentor others and to just be able to grow in your Christian walk. And so that's really, really important. And then we talked about on one day, what is your faith measuring up to? So have you ever grown things together in a garden and it changes the taste of the one thing? I don't know if you have, but I'm old. I always say I'm old. So I have done this. So there are certain things in the garden you shouldn't plant together. And like onion has a really strong flavor. And so when you plant it too closely to another fruit, it can change the flavor of that fruit. So if you plant it really close to tomatoes, for instance. So they say to plant a row of marigolds in between, which is really wise because it helps. So the same thing is true of the fruit of the Spirit. So if you're growing things together, it changes the taste. And something that I thought was so good that my pastor's wife had said was, God is patient and faithful. He's loving and kind. And so we need to put patience and faithfulness together. God will equip you, but we have to be obedient and trust. So be obedient and trust God. So what would it look like if we trusted God, but we were disobedient? Not just once in a while, because we're sinners, so we're going to be disobedient sometimes. But if we were doing that on a regular basis because we didn't care. What if you were patient, but you weren't faithful? What if you were kind, but you weren't gentle? Like it changes the look of it, doesn't it? And so we need to put the two together. We need to remember to pair them up and work on our fruit of the Spirit in pairs, and that will increase your faith. So I want you to stop for just a minute and ask God to speak to you. I just want you to, you might have to hit pause, or maybe you want to do it right when we're done here, but I want you to stop and pray and ask God to speak to you. And now the hard part is listening, because our thoughts like to get away with us, and we hear every other noise in the house, and we're not really paying attention. But I want you to stop for just a few minutes and ask God to speak to you, and really pay attention. Really listen to what thoughts come into your mind. It might be something that surprises you. It might not be something, you'll know it wasn't you because it's a thought that jumps in your head that was not anything you would have imagined you would have thought. But God is inside of you, and so your thoughts are His thoughts. His thoughts are your thoughts. I mean, His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, but when we have thoughts, it's Him. It's Him speaking to us. And so we need to pay attention to that. Because if He's living inside of you, He's going to bring thoughts to your mind. So I want you just to stop and ask Him, what fruit of the Spirit do I need to work on? What fruit of the Spirit do I need to cultivate? And maybe you already know what fruit of the Spirit you can harvest, but if you're not sure, ask Him, what fruit of the Spirit am I good at? Which one can I harvest? Which one can I use every day? Because He will tell you. So write down what He tells you too, because, and I always say this, write it down word for word, because Satan will come in and try and snatch it from you. And what he does, he'll say, did he really say that, or did he say this? And he'll try and twist it just a little, especially with the English language, because we have words that mean the same thing or have double meaning. So it's really easy for him to say, did he really say that, or did he say this? But if you write it down word for word, then it's harder for him to snatch it from you, because you can go back and say, no, this is what he said. You didn't just write down a little note and you're not quite sure what it means. You wrote down word for word. So that's important. So as I was listening to this was a daily Devo I was doing with the women's prayer team at church, or the women's group at church. Anyway, I'm listening to them, and on my phone, so I'm listening to them on my phone because we're on a Zoom call, and then I get a message that pops up, and it's T.D. Jakes, because I follow T.D. Jakes. And so a message pops up about I am good soil. And how cool is that? I just love how God marries things together. So T.D. Jakes is doing a sermon about good soil. I'm learning about harvesting and planting and cultivating and growing my fruit, and that just tickled me. And so later, when I was listening to T.D. Jakes, he was saying, let me get to the part where it was wasn't about good soil. This was in Timeless Theses of God, Part 2. But he said, he speaks to every creature. He's talking about Jesus. He speaks to every creature and the wind and the waves. So God speaks to weather. God speaks to the weather. God speaks to the woman. In this case, he was speaking to the woman caught in adultery. And he speaks to men. He was telling them, who's without sin, throw the first stone. And he said epistles are letters to particular people. So you've heard of, the epistle to the Romans or whatever. Those are letters written to a particular people. So in that case, it would be the letter to the Romans. Hebrews, though, is a thesis, and it is spoken by God. So he says, speak. God created out of his mouth. He spoke it into existence, right? He said, let there be. And he says, use your voice. He said, dance is praise. When we dance, that's praise. But worship requires words. And he also said, you don't have to be touched to be healed. So he was talking about somebody being healed. He said he's already been healed. It was past tense. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to have that written down. I have verse 1, but I don't know what book I was in. I apologize. But the point of that for me was that God speaks. He speaks to the weather. He speaks to women. He speaks to men. He speaks to the animals. He speaks, and he uses his voice. He used his voice to create, and we need to use our voice. And so, the reason I guess that meant so much to me is because God told me to start the YouTube channel, and then use your voice was one of the first sermons I heard from the Potter's House. Pastor Dobbins did when I was down there about using your voice. And so in this one, when he was talking about the epistles or letters to particular people, those are letters. Paul was using his voice. He was writing to them and giving them instruction. And so it's important for us to use our voice. And I think I might stop there. Let me see. Yes, I'm out of time. It's getting ready to go off. So I will stop there. But I want to know from you if you are still meeting him early in the morning, and if you wrote down your fruit of the Spirit the last time that I talked about it, so that you know that you've been working on it, and how is that going. I know some of you had direct messaged me and told me you were doing that. And then if you stop and take a moment, if you already did it because you hit pause, or if you're going to do it when we're done here, to ask God, what are the fruit of the Spirit that you need to work on? Which ones are you cultivating, and which ones are you harvesting that you need to be using every day? Ask him to speak to you, and stop for a moment and really listen. Write it down, put it in the comments, let me know. I would love to hear how he's speaking to you guys. All right, bye-bye.